I did find all of this kind of funny, just imagining how pissed Lorcan probably was to realize he walked into a group of Val commanders.
Bro, he had to be so mad. And it's been embarrassing for him. I mean, he got,
Yeah,
like,
he
I
got
can't think of the
played.
word. Yes, thank you. He got played by a 19-year-old girl. I know she's a
The
woman, but like,
fire-breathing bitch queen.
exactly.
A
Like, but to
19-year-old
him, she's
Yeah.
basically a child. He
Right,
got played
right.
by a 19-year-old fire-breathing bitch queen child. And how embarrassing for him.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Looked On Fantasy Podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are discussing Queen of Shadows, chapters 35 through 41. We are so close to something big, and I am itching to get into the next set of chapters because we ended right before the meeting with Arobynn.
Oh, it's time, baby. It's time.
But on the flip side, thank God for Elide, because she was making some moves with her investigation in Morath.
Yes, I cannot get a good read on her character. Sometimes she seems like such a meek little coward, honestly. But then she's so clever. And then she does all these things that are pretty extraordinarily brave. And so I'm like, wait, are you brave or not? I can't tell. And are you just doing this literally for survival out of necessity? I can't get a read on her, but thank God for her.
As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 35 through 41 specifically, but it is likely that there will be spoilers for all the books we've covered so far. This includes Tab, TOG, Com, and Hoth. Otherwise, this series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have explicit conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are reading along with us, the next week's Queen of Shadows episode will cover chapters 42 through 47, and that will get us through part 1 of Queen of Shadows. Next, Addison, where are we at with the Onyx Storm countdown?
All right, we're getting close, guys. Today is December 29th, and there are 24 days until Onyx Storm is released.
Less than a month.
Less than a month. It's actually time to be excited. Start your rereads and get ready. I'm so ready to go back to Vizcaya.
Let's go. So that is all for housekeeping, and let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we will dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments at the end. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Happily. Chapter 35. Chaol, Nesryn, and the other rebels successfully managed to kill the Volg soldiers guarding the prisoners on the way to Morath. Drunk on victory and success, Chaol couldn't help but notice Nesryn's midnight eyes and her dark hair blowing in the breeze. He asked her if she wanted to go for a drink, and although she was initially hesitant, she eventually agreed. They were interrupted by Sen, who posited the idea that they should abandon Rifthold and carry on the fight in Terrasen. Before an argument could break out, Nesryn interrupted them. Word, bless her. That night, Aelin slipped out of bed and dressed and then armed herself with Damaris and Goldryn. She slipped out of the apartment like a shadow, and Rowan and Adian, they were none the wiser. Chapter 36. Luring in Lorcan was too easy. So easy, in fact, Aelin was actually disappointed he fell for it. After tricking Lorcan into going into a den of Volg commanders equipped with a wordhound, Aelin sauntered down the street. But it wasn't long before Lorcan confronted Aelin and threatened to end her. But Aelin was ready and held a blade to Lorcan's favorite body part and told him hurting her would be a big mistake. Get it? Rowan showed up just in time and the three faced off. Lorcan warned that he would get even with Aelin and she better watch her back. Aelin and Rowan make it back to the apartment where they bickered about Aelin doing whatever she wants when she wants. And really, they should just kiss already because we all know that's what they both really want to do. So put us out of our misery and let's get to it.
Oh my God, hurry up. I've been waiting.
I know. There's no slow burn. Like the slow burn was Heir of Fire. So like now it's just time to get to the good part. Chapter 37. Another day, another chapter of Dorian's suffering. The Volg Prince continues the psychological torture of Dorian by making him go down to the dungeons beneath the castle and watch the king interrogate and torture the people of Otterlin. The demon savored it, growing stronger each day it went down there. But there was nothing Dorian could do. He added their suffering to the memories that kept him company and let the demon take him back to those dungeons of agony and despair the next day and the next. Chapter 38. Rowan, Aelin, and Aedion were eating what I like to call girl dinner when Lysandra popped over for what was supposed to be a quick visit to drop something off for Aelin, when Rowan dropped a fucking atomic bomb on us. Lysandra is a shapeshifter. And man, I did not see that coming. Lorraine did, but we're not going to talk about that. Lysandra told the group about her life growing up and ever so carefully tested the waters with Aelin to see how she would feel about shapeshifters being free in the world once magic was unfrozen in Aurelia. Lysandra departs and she and Aelin have a brief and somewhat cryptic conversation about what is planned to go down at the Assassin's Keep in 2 days when Arobynn calls in his favor. Arobynn did in fact call in his favor, and in classic Arobynn fashion, he did it with a bougie gift and a threatening invitation. All just another move in the game he and Aelin had been playing for weeks. Aelin and Rowan got dressed and prepared to go hunt a pretty little demon. Chapter 39. Aelin and Rowan were successful in their hunting of a Volg commander. After a quick and informative interrogation, they learned that the rings are what allowed the Volg inside, and the human Stefan, who was trapped, begged to be killed. So Aelin agreed, but first he had to do something for her. That night, Aelin awoke drenched in sweat, and it was only seeing Rowan real and alive and well that calmed her racing heart. But she did not go back to sleep. She had one more thing she needed to do. It was almost 4 a.m. when she came back, and Rowan was practically breathing fire because he was so angry. But before he could even pick a fight, an exhausted Aelin had fallen asleep. Rowan wasn't pissy. No, pissy didn't cover a fraction of it. Trying to shake off the rage, Rowan decided he would make some tea, but was interrupted by Aelin. They agreed to fight after she drank her first cup of tea, but Aelin threw a curveball into Rowan's fight plan and asked him to go with her to Sam's grave. Aelin and Rowan went to Sam's grave. Aelin left 3 pebbles, 2 for the years since he had been taken away from her, and 1 for what they had been together. And then she told him all the things left in her heart that she never got to tell him. And then Addison and Lorraine started bawling. But there wasn't time for tears, because tonight would be the last night Arobynn Hamel spent in the land of the living. Or so we hope.
Ooh.
Chapter 40. Elide enacted her plan to get into the chamber where the Yellowlegs coven was being held. Much to our disappointment, the poison was not for Vernon, but instead for the laundry ladies, just enough to make them sick so Elide could volunteer to help in the laundry room. Her plan went off without a hitch, except for the part that when she beheld the horrors in the secret chamber, she could not stop vomiting. Manon commanded Elide to report, and so she did. She told Astrid, Sorrel, and Manon about the demonic monster babies she saw and how the Yellowlegs witches were basically being tortured. This prompted Astrid to absolutely lose her shit on Manon, and things went from bad to worse very quickly, quite literally ending in bloodshed. It was only pure luck that Astrid was able to walk out of the room. Afterward, Elide bandaged Manon's arm, and they had the first real conversation about what links they would go to find their way back home. Chapter 41. Aelin stared at the bottle of amber liquid that smelled of almonds. One last move in the game with Arobynn that would end tonight, and then everything would change. She steeled herself and reached for the oil. While Aelin dressed, Rowan and Aedion had a brief conversation about how the evening would go and how they would work together if Aelin decided she wanted them to dispose of Arobynn. Then it was time for the games to begin. Rowan was struck stupid as he beheld Aelin in that black velvet dress with a golden dragon embroidered on the back. But Aelin wasn't the only one who cleaned up nicely. Rowan didn't look so bad himself, and our girl definitely took notice. Rowan offered Aelin his arm, and the two set off into the night. And that concludes the book report.
Wow. What a picture.
Wow. Well, except for that they're going to the Assassin's Keep to meet one of the worst people alive. But yes, the circumstances were different.
This is not homecoming.
They're not going anywhere fun.
Nope. Well, thank you for the book report. And now let's get into the analysis. And of course, per usual, we do have some overarching thoughts.
All right, so let me just collect myself because I'm going to have to eat it this episode. I'm going to say it here and now. It's possible that I may have been wrong in disagreeing with Lorraine's speculation that Lysandra had some kind of animal form. It's possible. And okay, we're going to move on from that. So the next thing...
No. Not so fast.
Oh my God, the way I screamed.
Excited. No, I'm not going to rub it in or anything, but...
You should.
No, I was just really excited to discover that this is what she had, because I mean, it's crazy. It's been mentioned so many times that shifters exist in this world, but we had yet to meet any of them.
Well, that's not true. We have met a shifter. The spider silk merchant. The spider silk merchant was a shifter. Yes, I actually have quite a few thoughts about that when we get to the part about Lysandra. But we didn't know he was a shifter at the time when we met him. So
yeah, that's true.
The next thing is, once again, I am disappointed in myself because I still cannot for the life of me figure out the plan. I could see it and I can feel it coming together. I just don't freaking get it. But happily, I am 99% sure it's all going to come together in the next set of chapters, and that's how we'll end part 1. So I will be put out of my misery soon. The only thing I've still got going for me is I'm still convinced whatever she's doing at the bank has to do with the amulet and or getting Arobynn's money so they can pay for the war in Terrasen.
Yeah.
Other than that, I have no idea what
I
they're
had
gonna
no
do.
freaking idea. I was like, I know it's going to lead to something, but I have not put any pieces together.
Same. It's just ain't nothing up here but a bunch of rocks. You know what I mean? All right. And last, I'm just giving you all a forewarning. Surprisingly, this set of chapters prompted an emotional and thought-provoking response from me when it came to the witches. We will, of course, talk about it more when we get there, but I'm really starting to become invested in the witches, and not just how they fit into the storyline and how it affects Aelin's story, but as an independent entity in the book. I almost feel like I could do a standalone with them. Obviously, making a big assumption here that at some point their paths are going to cross with Aelin. That seems pretty likely. But the witches themselves, like their backstory, their culture, their history is really starting to take root in its own separate story for me. And I'm like really invested. I want good things for them.
I'm really invested in them getting home and like figuring out what to do about the king in the future. And also, once again, Asterin.
Yeah.
I just really feel like there's something going on with Asterin, or there's more that we're going to learn about her or something because of her particular attachment and her always prodding and questioning Manon specifically. And I'm like, how did she get to be that way? Because her and Ghislaine are the two witches that act much different than the rest of the witches, it seems like. So you have to wonder what's going on there and what happened.
I've liked Asterin since the moment I met her. I knew there was something good about her. I just don't know specifically what it is yet, but I'm very pro Asterin.
So that concludes our thoughts, and now let's get into the analysis, starting with chapter 35. Fresh off a Valg slaughter, Chaol thinks they'd done this. Together, they'd saved these people more at once than they'd ever rescued before, and with no loss of life beyond the Valg, though he was bothered by the fact that Nesryn had paired off with another rebel for the attack.
Oh yeah, I bet he was bothered. Chaol's thoughts during this section definitely gave off vibes of, maybe I want something more with Nesryn. For example, when he thinks her midnight eyes were bright, and even with her face splattered in black blood, her smile relieved, a bit wild with the thrill of the fight. Their victory was ... beautiful. And I was like, whoa. At no point did I know where that sentence was going to go. You know,
how you really feel, Chaol.
Right. But something about that just screams to me there's been this subtle shift in how he perceives her. Like something is starting to change.
Oh, it's because of Aelin and Nesryn. How Nesryn's kind of just like, all right, whatever, Chaol. She's indifferent, and he's bothered by that. He wants her to care about it, and he's going in for the chase now.
Chaol likes a woman who plays hard to get. I will say that.
I guess so. Seems like it.
I also have to say this scene reminded me of Mulan. If you've never watched it, I don't know why you haven't, but I really love Mulan. Like, it's one of my favorite Disney movies. If this reference is like super esoteric and lost on you, just roll with it. But at the end of the movie, after Mulan saves everyone and the emperor thanks her and everyone's bowing to her, Shang, the commander, the really hot one, they obviously have like a thing. He stops her and he starts to see something like kind of emotional, and he goes, you fight good. And that's basically what Chaol did here. And that's what it reminded me of. Chaol obviously wants to see something more. And he's like, you did a good job there,
great.
Buddy. Yeah, like a little pat on the back.
A beautiful smile. Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's how it reminded me. So now in my mind, that's actually how I see their relationship. Because in a way, I mean, it's kind of similar, right? Their relationship is all about fighting and the mission. And then it like has developed into something more. So other than the fact that Nesryn has never pretended to be a man, it's like kind of the similar trajectory so far.
You know, I'm glad you found that out because I hadn't thought about that until now, but checks out. So as they free the prisoners, Chaol offers that perhaps he and Nesryn could get a drink together once back in Rifthold, but Nesryn counters, I thought we were friends. Friends don't spend time with each other only when they're feeling sorry for themselves or bite each other's heads off for asking difficult questions. And I was like, good for Nesryn for calling Chaol out, because he has not appreciated her company as a friend or even her skill as a fighter. I mean, he does mention that she's good, but still underappreciated, undervalued.
He totally takes her for granted. Absolutely.
Nesryn does agree, however, with Chaol's assurances that he did like her company, though it bothered him that he could go drinking with or without her, and she wouldn't particularly care. Obviously, between noticing her smile, fighting the urge to brush blood from her cheek, and being bothered by her nonchalant approach to their friendship, Chaol's definitely got some romantic feelings growing here. At least that's how it feels.
Oh, yeah.
The conversation shifts to a more important topic as Nesryn wonders why the king, after 10 years, would suddenly push this movement to Morath and ask, what's it building to? And I was like, same girl, same.
Yes. Once again, thank the word for Nesryn. Someone is paying attention and asking the right fucking questions. It's about time. Literally, Nesryn, she's the unsung hero of this book. Her and Elide. Without them, they're all just a bunch of morons.
No one would be
flailing around in the dark, fighting Vogue, you know?
True. Chaol points out that Aelin Galathinius' return could have prompted the king, but Nesryn doesn't buy that. Instead, she says it's been in the works for a long, long time. So this is the line of thinking from Nesryn that's been similar to thoughts about why Morath and what's going on with the Vogue, the king and the duke are actually even doing there in the first place. But Nesryn's thought ultimately confirms that the Vogue have just been waiting for the right opportunity and that their big plan seems to be taking place in Morath primarily. Like, that's home base for what's going on.
I feel like this is pretty much as good as it gets in text confirmation that there was a specific reason that they were waiting on this timeline, because to her point, why did we not do this 10 years ago when Terrasen felt like, why not just boom, 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 knock it out? And so clearly there was something in the works, whether the king was waiting for the right time, you know, Jupiter to align with whatever moon or some voodoo hippie magic. I don't know, whatever. But there's some distinct reason that they're waiting, and now is the time.
Sen, one of the leaders, interrupts to suggest moving rebel operations to another city where the Vogue's foothold isn't as secure. And if Aelin Galathinius is lingering near Rifthold, we should meet with her, maybe head for Terrasen, push Adelin out, and hold the line.
I did a lot of thinking about his reasoning here, and to be honest, it's pretty sound logic. It really is starting to feel like they're just too close to the heart of the enemy to be effective, and truly, truly, their time and resources would be better spent building up the resistance outside of the king's reach. I hate to say abandon Rifthold, but really that's probably in the best interest of making sure that the rebellion survives.
That's true. Plus, I'm sure that's where it's heading anyway. I don't think the king and the Vogue or whatever are going to stop with just Rifthold, as we've already seen. So if you don't start establishing things in other countries or other territories early enough, then it definitely makes them more susceptible to just like quickly being overtaken. So
they don't even have to leave Adelin, just leave Rifthold. Yeah. Right? Just start pushing out the perimeter of your recruiting / barrier, whatever you want to call it.
Chaol refuses this plan, stating we can't abandon Rifthold, but Nesryn interrupts to remind them that they need to get to the river where boats would pick up the rescued prisoners. I think this was a good reminder that one faction of the rebel cause has been dedicated to restoring Aelin Galathinius to Terrasen's throne, and that this faction is separate from Chaol's relationship to the rebel movement and his reasoning for joining the rebels, which has primarily been about protecting the innocent people of Adelin, and then, of course, helping Dorian. And I'm just pointing that out because it seems like this difference could lead to some tension for Chaol within the rebel group in the future.
I think so, too. And I think back in Com, that was an original division among the rebels, right? What do we focus on? What's our best path to success? Some wanted to find Aelin, you know, whatever. So I think you're right. I think ultimately this conversation, though, is a precursor for the longer conversations and decisions the rebels are going to have to make. And I also think it would be easier for Chaol to go if Dorian was either dead or rescued. I think that's a big part of Chaol's hang up, because I do think that Chaol is probably a pretty decent strategist, right? I would guess, just based on his background, his history, and his training, logically, he probably knows that's like the most sound military decision, right? He was captain of the guard. He managed all the king's forces, security, etc. So he has a pretty good working knowledge of allocating resources, energy expenditures, etc. I really do think a lot of it comes down to Dorian. He doesn't want to abandon Dorian.
I think that's a good point. Everything just leads back to hope. Hope, as Elide would say.
That pesky little hope.
To get back.
That's right.
To get back.
Hope to Terrasen, hope to kill Arobynn.
Also, this is just totally a side note, but where are they ultimately sending the rescued prisoners? Are they just going to send them to other cities for now?
That's my understanding, yes. I think very similar what they did with Madame Florine. They're just like literally getting them anywhere and everywhere. Even if it's just like further down the coast, to Melisande or Finero, or just the further away from Rifthold, the better.
After this, we check in with Aelin, who has gotten up in the middle of the night for another secret mission. And this time she takes Damaris and Goldrin with her. She sneaks out without disturbing Rowan or Adrian, and it's described that she is no more than a shadow. And I was like, Queen of Shadows indeed.
Yes, I thought the same thing.
But also, we see that Rowan wakes up later and finds her as she had hoped he would. But I was just thinking, like, why not plan for that? Why leave yourself potentially vulnerable by intentionally not letting Rowan or Adrian know? She had like banked on the fact that Rowan was gonna come find her later and help with the Lorcan situation, because obviously if he hadn't, it would have turned out pretty bad, I think. I don't know, I just feel like that was one thing that she probably could have told them about, but I'm sure she had a reason for it.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, girl, you were hoping Rowan would show up when he did, so why not just tell him? But honestly, she was worried they would stop this plan from happening in the first place, because it was pretty risky. Yeah. I think Rowan would have been like, you're not going to lure Lorcan into some kind of trap and then, face off with him. Yeah. Because it's pretty obvious from the next chapter that Lorcan is extremely deadly. He's absolutely lethal. Oftentimes, I feel like Aelin's risk assessment is not very good. I don't think she really knows who she's dealing with, but Rowan does. And so she's probably like, just trying to stop me and, whatever. So,
yeah, fair point. All right, so that concludes chapter 35. Moving on to chapter 36. We quickly learn Aelin used Chaol and Nesryn's reports to figure out exactly which sewer entrances Val commanders used to speak with the word hounds, and it turns out they preferred the most ancient waterways, rather than the more filthy main tunnels, which obviously, same. And apparently, these Valg are a little bougie too.
Lorraine would be a bougie Valg, that's for sure.
Me? I feel like you would be the bougie.
Oh my god, absolutely. No, yeah. I would be doing no sewer work. I would be working in the Glass Castle, 100%.
On the throne.
On the throne, that's right. I'd be the leader of the Valg, whoever that is. That would be me. So speaking of funny things, something about this plan was actually pretty funny to me. I could just picture her having a conversation with herself, pretending to be herself also. Yeah. I guess she's pretending to be Rowan or another male. I'm not really sure, but I just picture her being like, I have the other key. And then like shifting over and be like, what did you do with it? Go back and forth and sustaining that for a period of time. And it's just really funny to me.
She cleverly follows a Val commander into the sewers and plants info traps by pretending to have a whispered conversation about having the key until she reached the crossroads where Val commanders would meet their wordhound overseer. So first off, this was obviously fairly risky, but also very smart. And second, this confirms wordhounds are above the Val commanders in rank. So now I am inclined to believe that the clock tower gargoyles are real life Valg infused things like you were saying.
See, I'm not entirely sure the Valg are in them, because I was wondering if they're just imbued with some kind of magic that animates them, and then the king, quote unquote, drives them, so to speak, and uses them as his eyes and ears in the city. Because the only encounter we actually see with a word hound, it's the king's voice. So I don't know how much autonomy they have. Maybe there's a Valg in there, and then the king can like take it over for a period of time to communicate. Honestly, I feel like this is just going to be something that we wonder about. In reality, like, doesn't matter at all. It's not going to be relevant in any way. So I'm not going to dwell on it for too long, honestly.
No, you're right. I gotta.
No, it's a good one. It's a good question. I just feel like it's going to be one of those things like it's interesting to explore, but ultimately the word hounds are never going to come up again. Yeah.
True. Having successfully accomplished part 1 of her plan, Aelin sneaks back out of the sewers, and it's then that we learn part 2, which involved letting Lorcan track her into the sewers, where he would be met with a den of Val commanders and a word hound. This plan comes to fruition shortly after her sewer exit. I did find all of this kind of funny, just imagining how pissed Lorcan probably was to realize he walked into a group of Val commanders.
Bro, he had to be so mad. And it's been embarrassing for him. I mean, he got,
he got played.
Yes, thank you. He got played by a 19-year-old girl. I know she's a woman, but like
fire-breathing bitch queen.
exactly.
A
Like, but to
19-year-old
him, she's basically a child. He got played by a 19-year-old fire-breathing bitch queen child. And how embarrassing for him.
He should be embarrassed. A little while later, Lorcan is indeed very pissed as he slams her into the wall of an alley. She sneaks a peek at him, and Lorcan is described as having cruel features beneath a dark hood, along with onyx eyes matching shoulder-length hair and elongated canines. He sounds scary. And this doesn't sound like hot scary. He just sounds scary. I don't know. Something about the pitch black eyes always just reminds me of demon scary. You know, it's not even like glimmering eyes or something. It's just like pitch black, dark holes for eyes.
Like no irises,
endless dark. Yeah. And that's creepy.
I gotta be honest, he did sound kind of hot scary to me.
How did I know that was going to come up?
I know.
How did I know?
Really, though, he just seems like an actually mean, dark version of Rowan. Like, Rowan is a Sour Patch Kid, tough, sour exterior, but gushy sweet on the inside. Lorcan actually does just seem, like, mean and scary as hell, honestly.
What's the candy equivalent of that?
Warheads. Just actually gross.
Just like those, warhead,
yeah, like, it doesn't get more
warheads.
palatable as you go. Like, it's never enjoyable.
Lorcan the Warhead.
That sounds about right, actually. Yeah.
So Lorcan threatens to kill Aelin, but she flicks out a blade right near his groin and says, "Immortality seems like a long, long time to go without your favorite body part. Big risk to take, isn't it?"
I also have to point out here in the book, the word "big" is italicized, which is meant to draw emphasis to that word. As we learned later, when Aelin is joking with Rowan, this is very intentional humor, and I loved it. I thought it was very clever and well placed.
Lorcan ends up moving away, sneering that Roman was probably still warming her bed, but Aelin baits him into sharing some intel by asking, "Did you kill all of them? There were only 3 by my count." Lorcan goes on to reveal that there were 6 Valg commanders, and one of those stone demons had shown up in the sewers. This confirms to Aelin that the word counts could be killed, and that Lorcan had obviously figured out how to do it.
I thought this was very clever of her to also use Lorcan to see if word hounds could actually be killed, because if anyone could do it, it would be Lorcan or Rowan, and why risk Rowan, right? Like, let Lorcan handle it.
Before a real fight takes place between them, Rowan shows up with his knife angled along Lorcan's throat before he could so much as blink. With Rowan's threat, Lorcan shares some info about his presence in Rifthold. Supposedly, if Lorcan were killed, Maeve would help the king of Adarlan and work against them. He says, "You made a fatal mistake the moment you showed my queen that vision of you with the key, and you, allying yourself, binding yourself to a mortal queen. What will you do, Rowan, when she grows old and dies?" Last but not least, Lorcan also reveals that Maeve had allowed them to walk out of Doranel, but that they'd be waiting for when she trips up.
This brief exchange between them brought up a couple of questions and thoughts for me. For the first is, do you think that Lorcan is bluffing? That if Lorcan were killed, would Maeve actually help the king of Adarlan?
I don't see why she would have any reason to lie, but I also don't see why she would bother to help the king. Because she must know about the Valg in relationship to the king. Like, I just don't see how she wouldn't know that. And considering she was trying to keep them out in the first place, unless she's gonna use the king and she thinks she can overtake them and like get the word key. Okay.
That's what I think. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if she's already working with him anyway, so that she can figure out what he knows and figure out where the keys are, because she thinks she can overpower him. I don't think she actually wants to help him. I think she wants to use him, basically.
Yeah, that seems more aligned.
And then something else that really stood out to me is when Lorcan is telling Rowan what an idiot he is for binding himself to Aelin, who is mortal, and he asks Rowan, well, I guess there's 2 parts, what he will do when she dies someday. And actually, we had a brief conversation about this in the last episode about what happens. And I was like, I don't know, I guess when they die, they're released from their blood oath. But this conversation implies that it's not that simple. When the person who you swore a blood oath to dies, like, maybe you die too? I don't know. But the way it's phrased made me wonder about that.
That's a good point. I did find it interesting, but then I couldn't think of anything. So yeah.
Because why would it matter if he bound himself to a mortal queen? Who cares, right?
True.
But if it's when you bind yourself, your lives are bound. That's a little bit different. So going to be on the lookout for that. And of course, they would both think about that later. Nobody brings this back up. The other thing he says is, will you still share her bed when she looks old enough to be his mother? And that's a fair question. We've debated this before. Is Aelin immortal? In her human form, clearly not. But in her fae form, is she? Or does she have an extremely long lifespan? Is her aging stopped in her fae form? Like, could she live in her fae form forever? I don't know. But I am absolutely positive this conversation will come up again, and these issues need to be addressed.
That's a fair point. I feel like the frequency with which they're discussing her mortality definitely seems to indicate that Aelin is, in fact, just purely mortal. Or like that's what everyone thinks, at least. Aelin feigns boredom with his dramatic speeches, but goes on to say, I will never forget what you did to him that day in Dornell. One day, I'll come to claim that debt, too. Consider tonight a warning. As we kind of just touched on, I do ultimately wonder what Maeve's long-term plan is here. Does she really think that she's going to take the Valg? What is Maeve's ultimate angle, and how is she going to come into play when shit really starts going down? Back in her apartment, we learn that Aelin hadn't even been sure Lorcan would show up and fall for her trap, but Rowan warns her, you're lucky scraping you is all he did, before insisting she tell him if she decided to pick a fight with Lorcan again. Rowan also states it's not just your business, not anymore, then goes snarly protective female as they have another mental conversation where Aelin insists, let me do these things on my own. The conversation turns more serious as Aelin considers her future aging and they discuss Lorcan's grudge against her now. Rowan says he forgets and forgives even less easily than you do, especially when someone threatens to cut off his manhood.
Yeah, Lorcan is definitely going to come up again. Obviously, he's in Rifthold, but I think he's going to become a larger part of the story. I honestly have no idea how or what they're going to do to resolve the Lorcan issue. As long as he's still bound to Maeve, that seems like a problem. But I think that we're going to continue to see Lorcan pop up. He's just come up too much now.
Right. I'm just curious if Rowan's been questioning things about his blood oath to Maeve, and he has ultimately decided that if he had the choice earlier, he probably wouldn't have served under Maeve, right? And so then I want to know, is that how the rest of the cadre feels? Who feels similarly to Rowan? Is there anybody who does not feel similarly? Because I feel like that would be helpful to know. If Lorcan ultimately ends up sharing Rowan's perspective, then maybe that is like an angle they could take, figuring out how to, separate him from Maeve if possible. Because I doubt any of them ultimately, it doesn't sound like most of them really want
I was just
to
gonna
serve Maeve.
say, it seems like maybe in the beginning they did, but after centuries of seeing how horrible she is, they were like, oh, we fucked up in a big way.
Right.
Because I'm sure
they don't have a
Maeve,
choice.
yeah, I'm sure Maeve can be very charming and clever, and I'm sure it can be very deceitful and draw you in. Because you're talking about very powerful females, right? Immortals.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she enticed them all with some kind of bargain. She was able to get to the heart of like, here's what you really want. You want your mate Lyria to be protected. And like, that's how she trapped them. I don't know. I am curious about the origins of how they all ended up in her group, but I assume they all hate her.
I would agree with that.
Fuck Maeve, am I right?
Fuck Maeve. All right, moving on to chapter 37. This was a very brief chapter, and we start with Dorian's perspective. On this day, we learn that there are several people being held in the cells of the dungeons below the castle. Per usual, Dorian couldn't remember any of the people or their names, but he was forced to watch as prisoners were interrogated.
Specifically, he thinks yesterday, one of them, young, handsome, familiar, had recognized him and begged. He'd begged for mercy, insisted he knew nothing, and wept. And I wonder if this particular person will come up again later, just because he's pointed out specifically in the chapter. So if / when Dorian is ever freed from the Valg, he may be able to say, oh, I remember random person, this happened or whatever. It did prompt the idea also that if / when they can get Dorian free, he is going to be an invaluable wealth of knowledge about the Valg, what their goals are, how they do things, what's happening. And so from like a very selfish perspective, I hope they save Dorian so we can get some fucking information, because I still feel like I don't know anything. Like at the end of the day, I really don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we just haven't had enough information about the Valg. But I was almost thinking that this person, not only are they going to come up again, but maybe we've already met them. maybe it's a character we've already been introduced to
Yes.
as a side character, and that's how the person recognized him and everything. I just have no idea who it would be at this point because we didn't get enough details.
I wonder how Brello and Ress are doing. I'm a little worried about them. Haven't heard from them in a while.
I know. I hope they're okay.
They're not. They're probably not.
Dorian notes that the king never asked them any questions, but every day he continued to watch as the chambers filled with the reek of burning flesh and the coppery tang of blood, which the demon in him savored and used to grow stronger with each day. They went down and breathed in their pain. So this is obviously nothing new for Dorian, and it seems like the king is just murdering people for no other purpose than to entertain and feed the Valg, although they were asking questions, so I'm assuming he's trying to garner some kind of information. The only information I'm assuming he's trying to get is either related to Aelin or related to the rebels, right?
I would think so, yeah. What else could anybody offer him information-wise? I guess the question is, what purpose does this serve if he's just murdering people at large? My only guess, and this is rudimentary at best, is that he's somehow testing them to see how much magic they have in their blood, and if they don't make the cut, they just die. It's like a Hunger Games test, you know? When you get to live, that's your reward. And if you don't, you die.
I don't know. Knowing the Valg, I don't think they would keep anybody alive.
Or unless they want to take him to Morath to do whatever weird stuff they're going to do with him there.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on to chapter 38. We get big news in this chapter. Lysandra surprises everyone with her sneaky arrival in Aelin's apartment during breakfast the next morning. And first off, I just want to say that I really love Lysandra. She's just so like flirty and full of jokes, especially when she tells Rowan, I like your fangs.
It's just so funny to me because the little bit we knew of Lysandra, we're like, oh yeah, she kind of sucks. And now I'm like, oh my God, Lysandra is so great. I just love Lysandra. Yeah. What a complete 180. I also like how she comes in and just starts roasting them for being pitiful at cooking. She's like, really? Yeah. This is embarrassing. You great leaders, the three of you, this is what you can do. And it's even funnier when Aelin says, and this one, she jabbed a thumb in Rowan's direction, only knows how to cook meat on a stick over a fire. And besides being funny, this is a reference to a conversation Rowan and Aelin had in the untitled bonus scene from Heir of Fire, which if you have not listened to that episode, go check that out. But she asked him what his favorite food is, and he's like, whatever is keeping me alive. And then after further prompting, there's a vendor in Doranel who sells meat on a stick. And she's like, meat on a stick? That's it? Meat on a stick. So that was a nice little tie-in. And also so Rowan-coded, you know?
I was going to say that checks out for Rowan's exterior demeanor. So
Yep. I know it's about to be revealed, but I do love the very subtle foreshadowing in this conversation when it's described. Lysandra looks at Aelin, a sly cat's glance in Aelin's direction. And of course, it's about to be revealed, but I just love that last moment, that last little thing.
Okay, this is where we get the big reveal. So Rowan's response prompts the best jaw-dropping, satisfying moment I have had to date. He says, are you studying them so you can replicate them when you take my form, shape, shifter? I was like, ah!
Oh my God, the way I screamed.
Obviously, we had previously speculated based off Lysandra's past comments about her and Aelin being beasts wearing human skins and how she manages to like keep sneaking up on immortal beings. It feels very satisfying to finally have that crazy theory actually turned out to be true this time.
Yes, and when Lorraine said we had previously speculated, she means she. I believe specifically she said that, and I was like, no, that's not going to happen. Like, no, don't be weird. I knew you were going to say that, and I was wrong, and it hurts. It sucks. I remember when I was reading this chapter, man, I was like, oh! I like actually screamed, and I immediately texted Lorraine to see how far she'd read ahead. I was pretty certain she hadn't gotten this far because I would have definitely heard about it from her. So in a way, I'm glad I beat her to the punch, so I got to know before she did. But man, that hurt. Did not feel good.
I say we because this is a collaborative podcast.
It is. But I was not on board with that theory. I was like, nah, that doesn't even make any sense.
Next time you'll think twice before you question my crazy theories.
You know, you would think I will learn my lesson, but I absolutely will not.
So Aelin is also surprised and goes on to think that shapeshifters seem much more powerful and dangerous than fire, magic, wind, or ice. And she specifically thinks shifters Spies and thieves and assassins, able to demand any price for their service, the bane of courts across the world, so feared that they've been hunted nearly to extinction even before Arobynn banned magic. I don't know, I just never thought much about the potential of shapeshifters because we hadn't gotten a lot of information about them, but I did feel like that was just really cool and also very crazy. Being able to change into whatever form you want is incredibly useful as it is, but does that also mean that she can harness the power of someone she takes the form of?
I don't
And just like there's a whole bunch of
so.
questions that arise about like what it actually means to take somebody's form as a shapeshifter.
I also want to point out that this is important world building information that even pre the anti-magic hysteria, people despised and feared shapeshifters. So
yeah,
I'm assuming once magic is freed, this is going to come up again, that people are going to have a problem with Lysandra and other shifters because people in general had that issue prior to magic being frozen. And I mean, it makes sense, right? They're absolutely lethal, impossible to detect. If you can literally shift into any form, that's crazy. You could literally pretend to be the king of Otterlin, you know? All you have to do is get close enough to study their features. Like, it opens a lot of lethal doors.
Lysandra discloses no one, not even Arobynn, knew, but she asked Rowan how he figured it out. And his response was that her scent was the same as the shifters he'd met centuries ago. So first off, I wonder how many shifters still exist and who those shifters Rowan met were. Also, I keep thinking about Maeve and how there's that line about how she wore many skins. And could it be that Maeve is actually a shifter too? I think we talked about it briefly before, but that would be quite the turntable if you ask me.
The turntable. Actually, that's a really good call out. That would not surprise me if that turned out to be true. It just seems that Maeve has some really unique special powers. And since it seems that shifters in general are rare, and we know they were basically hunted to extinction, the fact that she's been able to maintain that shape-shifting form would really come in handy and be pretty fucking lethal, to be honest. So I kind of forgot about Maeve, honestly. Like, she was all in Heir of Fire, and then I was like, oh yeah, Maeve still exists. So I kind of want to know what she's up to.
Yeah, what is she doing over there?
You know,
across the seas.
I'll have to switch for like, where is Arobynn Hamel? What is he doing? And I switch it to Maeve. Like, where is Maeve? What is she doing?
What is she doing? Where has she been? What's her next move?
Exactly. This whole conversation about shapeshifters brought up for me the spider silk merchant from Tab, who we later learned when Manon went to steal the spider silk, that very same merchant was a shapeshifter. It's been quite a while since we talked about him, but we did speculate he would come up again. And I still stand by that, actually. So that's the only other shapeshifter we quote unquote have been introduced to. We didn't know at the time in Tab. And of course, we have not seen or heard from them since. And maybe they'll never come up again. But I think you and I are on the same page that that person's going to come back up.
That merchant was important.
I know.
And thanks for the reminder, because I totally forgot about him. So even though he's so important.
I don't know why, but that just like really stood out to me. And I still think about that. I still think those damn Stygian spiders are important. Like, those are going to come back up.
Yes, the Stygian spiders. They had a whole song written about them. So
the Stygian suite.
So with this reveal, Rowan and Aelin seem mostly unconcerned, but Lysandra takes note of Aelin's silence, and Aelin thinks a moment to sort out one friend from another. The friend she had loved and who had lied to her at every chance, and the friend she had hated, who she had kept secrets from herself. Hated until love and hate had met in the middle, fused by loves. So I do understand that Nehemia lied, but to this day, I still don't understand why Aelin was just so incredibly angry at her, and despite her doing the exact same thing, essentially. I know she thinks that she could have stopped Nehemia from dying if she'd known, but at the end of the day, none of them can really afford to disclose all information to people unless they can guarantee those people are trustworthy and uncompromised. And by that point, I just don't think Aelin and Nehemia really knew each other well enough. And of course, I still to this day have a lot of questions about Nehemia.
Well, the great irony of all that is that Nehemia knew who she was the whole time.
True.
So it's like all that for nothing. But overall, I think this is just a really tricky emotional situation to navigate. You're really splitting hairs on what is acceptable lying. I think ultimately it stems from Aelin feeling very angry and betrayed that Nehemia orchestrated her own death and abandoned her. It's not just about the lies, but it's about the actions she took. I did appreciate Aelin processing this very quickly because Lysandra did lie, but it is very different. In a way, Aelin and Lysandra's lies are two sides of the same coin. They lied about their true identity for their own safety and protection. So I'm glad that she was able to work through that and be like, no, it's okay. This was an acceptable lie.
Lysandra goes on to tell everyone about her life growing up, and every time we get background on a new character, it honestly never fails to upset me. They all have like really tragic backstories, and I guess that's to be expected. But just all this collective trauma between all of them is enough to put me in therapy just thinking about it.
Did no one have a happy childhood? Was the world really a good place before the king took over? Like, is it that much worse now? Doesn't really seem like it, honestly.
Lysandra figures her shifting genes were passed down via her father, and she discovered her magic at the age of 5 or 6 years old.
Ooh, okay, so one of my favorite tropes has re-entered the chat. You know, with Aiden, we didn't know who his father was until the last set of chapters, but we're back in the game again. The unknown identity of a parent. Lysandra says, it wasn't my mother, so my father must have had the gift. She never mentioned him or seemed to miss him. So immediately I was like, well, that's going to come up later. I actually thought, what if her father is a spider silk merchant and that's his relevance to the story? Because he is a shifter.
Right.
I mean, that's the only other shifter we've met. Of course, it could be anybody else. I guess technically, well, no, never mind. I was like, Gavriel's a shifter, but he's Fae, and all Fae can shift. So shape-shifting, all Fae can shape-shift, but not all shapeshifters are Fae, if that makes sense. So anyway, whatever. Yeah. But I'm just going to stay here now. So when I'm right, I can be like, yes, I told you.
No, I actually really like that. Wait, I had not thought about that at all, but that's crazy because it's so rare and it has to be passed off. So,
and even if that isn't the case, I do feel like her father will be notable and who he is will come back up again. It just has to.
Yeah.
Name a fantasy book where one of them doesn't know who one of the parents are and never comes up again. It's not done. That's the trope.
Bookmark it, folks. We're going to come back to it later.
We'll think about that later.
So to go back to Lysandra's background, by the age of 7, her mother had beaten her and then kicked her out after she made the mistake of shifting in her presence. Something that she can't remember had prompted her to shift into a hissing tabby cat, of all things. Rowan comments she was a full-powered shifter, which I guess indicates that there can be different degrees of shifting capability, sort of like being demi-fae versus full fae in that way.
Oh, that's interesting.
Her own mother had threatened to call the authorities on her since magic was outlawed and everyone distrusted shifters anyway. So Lysandra ran away and she never saw her mother again. Aelin, in her thoughts, decides that Lysandra's situation and Nehemia's situation were different and that Lysandra hadn't lied to her. Instead, they were even. After all, she hadn't told Lysandra that she was a queen. I'm glad Aelin has come to this conclusion about Lysandra because it's true. Both of their identities leave them incredibly vulnerable for risk of death, given the context of how things are in Aurelia. And I still think Aelin needs to get over the Nehemia thing, but maybe she'll end up learning more about Nehemia later on. And that info could explain why Nehemia had been so secretive and who Nehemia really is and like what's really going on with her. Because I still feel like there's some relevance to that, like something about what Nehemia was doing or what she knew, I feel like is going to be important to the plot later on.
That's fair, because that whole, when the Queen and the Princess chapter back in Calm, Nehemia knew a lot. She knew who Aelin really was.
Yes.
She could talk to Elena. So I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but it's clear that she had access to a lot more knowledge than the average person.
Right. She knew about word marks.
And she knew about Dorian's magic. Well, we don't know for sure, but like heavy speculation when she taps his chest, you know, and something awakened in him. Damn, you're right. Stupid Nehemia. Why'd you have to do what she did? God.
Maybe we are pissed that she died because...
Well, I mean, I'm pissed that she did it herself. There was no other way.
That's true.
There was no other way to get Aelin to spring into action. God, now I'm just angry all over again. Damn it. Circling back to the main point, I do feel that their lies were equitable as they could be, and the information was absolutely vital to their survival and safety, so it's reasonable that they wouldn't tell anyone. And I think that's the ultimate conclusion that Aelin comes to.
Lysandra continues with how she survived all these years, and we learn she used her abilities to disguise herself. Eventually, she realized that when she made herself pretty when begging for money, it came far faster. And she says, I was wearing one of these beautiful faces the day magic fell, and I've been stuck in it ever since. So this is one thing that Lysandra warns about. You could actually forget your real form, as had happened to her from being in someone else's form for so long at this point.
I do wonder if we'll ever see Lysandra's trueborn form again. Kind of feels like no, and also doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, feel that relevant. Like maybe to her character arc it would be, but I did wonder if that would come up again.
Once finished, Lysandra tests them with her own questions, and she is right too, I think. She asks, if magic is free again, would you be wary of a shapeshifter? Fortunately, Aelin responds, I'd be jealous of a shapeshifter. Shifting into any form I please would come in rather handy. A shapeshifter would make a powerful ally, and an even more entertaining friend. Aelin also adds a shapeshifter can make a huge difference on a battlefield once magic is freed. And I think all of these are great points. I can see why being a shifter is so dangerous. To become anyone or anything is just so useful for spying purposes and just scheming. And based on what Aelyn's saying, I do really want to know if she can use powers of the whatever form she takes as well. That's like the one burning question I have about shapeshifting situations.
I don't know why my gut just says no. It's just you can look like them, but you can't.
That might be too overpowered.
Too overpowered.
If you could, yeah.
Because then you could just find the most powerful person. Yeah. So I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
I'm going to say
when
no.
we think about it, it seems too powerful.
Too much of a good thing, you know?
Yeah. Eventually, the true reason for Lysandra's visit is revealed, and she warns him that Arobynn was planning on calling in his Val commander favor tomorrow.
I also want to know what was in the sack that she gave Aelin. Remember, she hands her a sack and then it's kind of glazed over. I had no ideas. Not even a hint of an idea.
I didn't either.
Okay.
I thought maybe it's like clothes or something. Or
I don't know what she could give her.
Disguises or something, but
maybe,
other than that,
nothing.
Apparently all of them were expected to come, and Lysandra also states it would likely was a trap in some way or another. He wants you to deliver it and then join him for dinner. And I was like, immediately no. Bad news bears right there. Arobynn for sure has something up his sleeve. I just don't believe he's going to let them give him the vow, then leave in peace, especially since he knows about Rowan.
Oh, yeah.
Probably that he's Fae and stuff. Arobynn's always scheming, so nothing is ever that simple with him.
Absolutely. This has bad news written all over it. All I can think is that Aelin knew this was coming and it's all part of her big plan that has yet to be revealed to us, but I don't know. I don't like it. I don't feel good.
Aelin has similar thoughts, and she figures it wouldn't be poison, as Aelin had suggested. She knows whatever Arobynn had planned, his favorite part of scheming laid in the power he could wield over them. Aelin then walks Lysandra out, and they have a private conversation away from Rowan and Aelin. Lysandra asks if Aelin was mad for not telling her, but Aelin assures her she understood her secret could have gotten her killed, and says, I wondered if I did something wrong, something to make you not trust me enough to tell me. And I was like, Aelin, let's not forget it's been like a month since y'all have become friends.
If that.
And also, she used to threaten to kill her, so I don't blame her for not telling her everything about herself.
I appreciate the fast and true friend trope, but I'm like, I'm not going to trust you with the most sensitive information about myself that could literally have me killed at a moment's notice. Like, girl, we ain't been friends that long. But I will say, to be fair, they have known each other since they were children. So even though they didn't like each other, they probably still have a pretty good developed sense of who each other is. And so that probably kind of helps fast track the friendship, right? It's not like they just met.
And they have a lot of shared experiences at this point.
Yeah. A common enemy will do that to friends.
Aelin goes on to mention how dangerous it had been for Lysandra, especially with the Val guards, noting how she kept turning away and hiding behind Arobynn when they were back in the pits. I'm assuming this means that the Val can tell who she is, too, in the same way that Rowan could.
I was a little confused by this because it seems like the Val can sense magic in people's blood. That was the whole thing with Ren. Chaol, Nesryn, and Ren went to go fight some Volg, and the Volg just honed in on Ren because he has magic in his blood. And I'm like, how did they not pick that up on Lysandra? Like, how close do they have to be? So I thought that was a little odd, but I would assume, yes, it's because they could sense it if they got close enough to her or whatever.
I also thought it was sweet that Lysandra says, even before I knew who you were, Aelin, I knew what you were working toward. It was worth it. A world where people like me don't have to hide. Their conversation ends with Lysandra's assurance that as much as she wanted her revenge on Arobynn, she didn't mind if Aelin did it because she wouldn't hesitate, and she found that comforting. Next morning, Aelin receives an invitation for her and 2 guests to arrive for dinner at 8 p.m., as Lysandra had stated, so Arobynn could finally call in his favor. The invitation was accompanied by a box as well that contained almond-scented skin oil that Aelin would have to wear. And I was like, barf. First off, the word skin oil. I don't know what it is about that, but it just sounds gross for some reason. It makes it sound like it was extracted from Arabynn's personal skin oil glands or something. And I was like, ugh.
Stop saying skin oil. Ew. I'm so uncomfy right now.
It's gross. I don't know what I'm like. Why can't you just say perfumed oil or something? Why do you have to say skin oil?
Okay, yeah, it's gross. He's gross. Everything's gross. This conversation is gross. I'm gonna get you some skin oil for your birthday.
Oh gosh, don't you dare. I'm gonna throw it in the trash. Especially if it smells like almonds. Just kidding. I won't, but
yeah, you will. It's okay.
Respectfully, no.
I mean, it feels like a very intimate gift, right? Honestly, when you say skin oil, I think of like massage oil.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
For like a special time for you and your significant other.
Special activities.
Yes. And for someone who's never declared himself as father, brother, or lover, to give that to a teenage girl feels a little odd. Yeah.
Sure does.
Sure does.
And then second, the whole concept of using it as a power play is just gross. And I'm glad Aelin is disgusted by the thought of Aelin wearing that skin oil, because I agree. They figure Arobynn already knew about everyone's status, but they go on to decide the logistics of catching a Valguard. Much to Aelin's dismay, Aelin commands him to stay home because his injuries left him at risk for infection if he went down into those nasty sewers. And I agree. Aelin asks if Lysandra could be trusted, and Aelin responds they'll find out later, though she thinks she wouldn't know if Arobynn was using her. You really do have to wonder how much or what else Arobynn knows, because we know he's been keeping tabs on everyone. And so mostly I'm just worried for Lysandra, because she's on her own with Clarice or at the Assassin's Keep. Yes. I don't know. I'm just worried.
Feel very anxious for Lysandra. Aelin's thought here is exactly right. There is a very good chance that Arobynn could be using her, and Lysandra is none the wiser. Like, she doesn't even realize that she's being played. Happening. So it does make me very nervous for Lysandra.
Before they head out into the city, Rowan and Aelin exchange a mental conversation, and for the first time, it's commented on by Aelin, who says that will never stop being strange.
Oh, this totally stood out to me too. I feel this is basically confirmation they can mind speak, and it's obvious outwardly to people who spend any meaningful amount of time with them. I was like, oh, okay, so like everyone knows. It's obvious that they're having this I-mind conversation. Now, is it because they're carrying on? Is it because they're mates? Yet to be determined.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's important though.
Everything we talk about in this podcast is important.
Okay, so that ends chapter 38. Moving on to chapter 39. Down in the sewers, Aelin and Rowan are shocked that Lorcan had managed to massacre all the Val captains and the Wordhound, which is terrifying to think about in terms of just what that says about Lorcan in general.
Terrifying, but also kind of hot.
No, Addison. Scary. Remember when you said that about Arobynn?
Okay.
That
was okay. No, if that's not entirely what I said. You have to go back and listen to what I said in its entirety, because taken out of context. See, you know what? This is what's wrong with society. People take sound bites of things that people have said out of context, and it sounds really bad. But if you listen to the whole conversation, it makes sense. You know what? I'm not doing this with you, okay? Keep it moving.
I'm just letting you talk yourself into a corner.
I'm going to go back and delete that out of the episode. I'm going to erase it from the face of the earth.
Keep it.
I cannot be the only one who feels that way. Somebody text me and just tell me that you understand at least, so I don't feel so alone. Because Lorraine is bullying me on a public platform.
I will admit, he's very suave.
He is. He is. With that skin oil, he's smooth.
Ew. Smooth like an almond. I don't know. Okay. I'm moving on.
Okay.
Rowan also notes that the stone skin of the word hound seemed like an armor, but inside it still had flesh. Plus, he too smells the awful smell of the Valg, just as the witches do. So this is kind of what got me on the thought that maybe the gargoyles are like true living creatures and they just pretend to stand still in the clock tower. I don't know why they would pretend to stand there, but
I don't know.
Maybe they're forced to like, maybe they lock into place and they solidify once they're there.
I don't know. Once again, oh yeah, I see I wrote like 6 question marks. I'm confused by this. Knowing us, it will not matter and won't ever come up again after they're dead. So I'm like, whatever.
You got me up thinking about it with your comment about what's going on with those gargoyles. Now I'm on gargoyle alert.
Well, hopefully Aelin will go take on the clock tower and then we'll get some confirmation.
So the good thing is that however Lorcan killed the word hound, it worked and it has remained dead, or so it seems at least. We also get the big reveal of what Aelin's ulterior motive was with the Lorcan trap. So first, she knew the word of a Fey warrior and Rifthold would get back to the King of Adarlan thanks to his Valg and would likely have sent the rest of his word hounds after him. Second, once she learned that the word hounds could be killed and with Lorcan preoccupied, she planned to use the sewers to enter the castle and blow up the clock tower to ultimately free magic. There's a lot of moving parts to this plan, and there's a lot of things that need to go right for this to work, but if she can free magic, that's going to be a huge game changer for them. Though, as Chaol has expressed concern over, the release of magic is definitely going to lead to chaos in the beginning, at least.
Yeah, I feel like this is very common in a lot of sci-fi movies where the humans are trying to pull off a plan. And they ask the robot, they're like, what are our chances of success? And they're like, calculating 0.12% chance of success. And I'm like, that is Aelin's plan. She has like a 0.12% chance of success. There's so many moving parts, so many things. I will say if killing Arobynn goes smoothly, then really the last thing is Dorian in the clock tower. She rescued Aelin, she killed Arobynn, and which we are just assuming that happens. So we'll see. But I honed in on like, okay, great. You're going to blow up the clock tower. How? How are you going to do that? What are you going to use to blow up the clock tower? I'm pretty sure they don't have fucking dynamite in Adarlan or Aurelia. So
true.
How the fuck are you going to do that? And what are you going to use to do that? Because you don't have your fire magic.
Because they can't even touch it. She got those really
headaches
bad headaches
stuff.
And like was just not doing well around it that one time in the comp when she snuck down there. So
literally how? You and what army?
That's for her to find out and for us to keep reading about.
For her to figure out and for us to find out.
Yeah. So later on, they do in fact find a Valg commander who they had captured from a small patrol that they had ambushed. It's clear that the human within was still there, though he didn't have much longer. Through their questioning, we get the following information. The rings were used to enslave and corrupt them. The human man of this particular Valg is named Stevan, and he is from Melisande, but the Valg refuses to give its name. Aelin asks if he could come back if they remove the ring, but Stevan states, I don't want to, even if I could. The things I did, we did. He liked to watch while I took them, while I ripped them apart. I know Stevan is traumatized by everything, as many of the Valg-infected hosts probably are, if they aren't too far gone already, but this does sound kind of promising that the removal of the ring can restore one to oneself and not cause death or something. He's not saying that you can't take them off, but in Stefan's case, he's just obviously deeply traumatized from everything he's experienced. So his will to live has been crushed, but he's not denying that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They can't remove it.
I've just wondered, why don't they just cut off their finger? If you can actually can't physically take it off, I'd rather lose a finger than live infected by a Valg. So I'm sure it'll be revealed, but I am starting to wonder for the lesser Valg, can we just take off the rings? But see, then it would seem like the very first time that Stefan had control of his body, he would have taken the ring right off before he did anything bad. So then that implies to me that maybe they really can't take it off.
Right. And I guess the question still remains, even if you do take it off, do you actually have to then go a step further and like destroy the ring to get the Valg too? So
I don't know.
I don't know.
That's a good question.
Stevan also reveals to them that there is a Valg prince in Rifthold and is currently in Dorian's body. Stevan speculates that he could barely hold out against the Valg, so it was unlikely that Dorian would be able to resist a Valg prince. Aelin refused that statement, stating, you gave yourself to it, but Stevan states that their families were at risk and had no choice but to wear the ring with the uniform. The demon takes over and asks Aelin, "What are you? Let me taste you. Tell me what you are." And I do wonder if the Valg are familiar with Mala's power and they can recognize it in Aelin. I kind of feel like they could, right?
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, as we've talked about already, we know that they can sense magic and power within her, even if they don't know exactly why she has that power.
That's an interesting thought, because everything we know about the Valg points to them being ancient, like as old as the gods. The creation of Earth, or not Earth, I guess, the creation of life. There was also good and evil. And so it's possible it's kind of a classic tale as old as time, light against dark. And so they can inherently sense their greatest enemy, which is light magic, I guess.
Right. And that's another thing, is that they're scared of her power and like the Valg and stuff specifically. It's one of the few things that can kill them anyway. So I would imagine that's something an immortal evil entity would probably remember.
Probably. Yeah, fair enough.
Aelin ends up bargaining death, as Stefan begged for, in exchange for something that isn't revealed yet before they end their questioning.
Once again, I am disappointed in myself. I have nothing to offer in terms of speculation on what bargain is being struck and why. I assume like information, maybe? I don't know. Honestly, I got nothing.
I didn't have any idea either, so...
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Sometime later, Aelin awakes from a nightmare and reaches for Rowan, relieved to see he was alive and well. They'd prepared for the demon delivery to Arobynn the next day, as promised, but the words of the demon rang through her head. "I will destroy everything that you love." A promise. In that moment, she decides she had one more thing to do, and she leaves for a secret task. By 4 a.m., she arrives back to a seething Rowan, who states, "You smell like ash." She lies to Rowan about her task not being very high risk or whatever, and refuses to tell him where she'd been or what she'd been doing before quickly falling asleep. We change to Rowan's perspective, who had awoken before Aelin in the morning. He immediately inspected her clothes, smelled of dust and metal and smoke and sweat, and there were streaks of dirt and ash on the black cloth. No whiff of Lorcan or the Valg, no scent of blood. Per usual with this set of chapters, I have no idea what she was up to. Did she go and burn something because of the ash detail? Like, obviously, why else would you have ash on your clothes unless you went to burn something? But aside from that, I'm like, what would she be burning and why?
Oh, yeah, same. I'm like, what the hell did she go burn down? And for what purpose?
Despite his anger at her for not telling him where she'd been and endangering herself, he was satisfied to see that she'd fallen asleep in his shirt.
Ooh, yeah, it was.
Rowan leaves the room and thinks he dealt with young rulers before. Maeve had dispatched him to enough foreign courts that he knew how to get them to heal, but Aelin, this task, whatever she had done, required even him to be kept in ignorance. And I was like, Rowan has met his match, to say the least.
Yep, I thought the same thing. He may have dealt with young rulers, but he has never dealt with Aelin Ashriver Galathynia.
That's right. Fire-breathing bitch queen.
Fire-breathing bitch queen.
Aelin comes out and quickly shuts down Rowan's discussion attempts until she had her first cup of tea. And I just think it's funny that tea in this world is kind of like their coffee. And I, too, prefer not to converse until I've had my first cup of coffee.
I'm going to have to remember that when I come visit, because this may come as a shock to many of you, but I am a chatterbox. Like, from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, I'm like, no. Like, and I'm not a coffee drinker, so I forget that people quite literally can't function without coffee.
I'm kind of exaggerating. I'm not necessarily going to be like grumpy, but as soon as I wake up, the first thing I go and get is coffee. For sure. So
I don't think I've ever seen you grumpy before. Like, literally never.
Times, but
I don't believe you. You're too good-natured.
It can happen. Rowan sets aside his frustration for the time being, and Aelin asks him to accompany her for a grave visit before their meeting with Arobynn later. And it turns out the grave they're going to see was Sam's. Aww. I thought it was lovely that Aelin wore a spring grass-colored tunic and thinks the clothes Sam would have wanted her to wear reminded her of life. With a fistful of pebbles she found on the way, she reaches his simple, clean gravestone that had Sam Cortland, beloved, written on it. And apparently Arobynn had left it blank, which is so disrespectful of him.
Yes. Fuck Arobynn Hamill.
For real. But Wesley, kind man, had arranged for a tombstone carver to come and write those words on it. I also loved her thought, beloved not just by her, but by many. Sam, her Sam, and how they go on to place 3 stones on his grave, 2 for the years since he'd been taken from her, 1 for what they'd been together.
Yes, I know we talked about this last episode, but I still just love this custom of leaving stones that are eternal instead of flowers. And shout out to one of our listeners, Tracy. She actually messaged us and let us know that that custom is embedded in Jewish culture. That is something I did not know. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I like it too. As she sits down, it's also noted she feels the sun warmed her hair, a kiss of heat along her scalp, a trace of Mala, perhaps, even here. And I was like, Mala is always watching for her. And I love that.
Thanks, Mala.
Thanks, Mala. Aelin continues on to tell him everything that had happened. She also says, I never told you how I felt, but I loved you, and I think a part of me might always love you. Maybe you were my mate and I never knew it. Maybe I'll spend the rest of my life wondering about that. Maybe I'll see you again in the afterworld, and then I'll know for sure. But until then, I'll miss you, and I'll wish you were here. Oh my gosh. I actually did tear up when I read that.
Me too.
For those of you that have been listening for a while, I've stated that I didn't quite feel totally devastated by what happened to Sam because I just didn't feel like we got enough time with him.
Yeah, we didn't care at all.
Over time, having these thoughts and feelings expressed from Aelin has been important because it continues to help the memory of Sam live on. And then it also continues to build, I think, our connection with Sam as a character. I think it's through Aelin's continued connection to him that we also grow to love and appreciate his character more. And I've finally hit that point now where I was like, oh, okay, I understand now.
I feel the exact same way. But I thought of one other thing. I think seeing Rowan place a stone somehow makes it hit home more, right? Rowan, who is a mirror to Aelin's soul, recognizes the absolute importance and value that Sam brought to her life. And even though probably he's a little jelly, that they had a thing,
right,
still wants to pay his respects for who he was to her. And I think that kind of makes it hit home a little bit more too.
Also, I can see why some people enjoyed reading Tab After Hoff. Just because I think all the events from that story would have been fresh in your mind going into Queen of Shadows. And so that makes sense. I'm not saying I personally would want to do that. I still feel that Tab should be read earlier rather than later. But I do understand why people would read it after Heir of Fire. So
Nah, you people who read Tab After Hoff, you're crazy. Okay, you're unhinged. No, go back and listen to The Assassin in the Empire because I think I gave a TED Talk about how you should read Tab first. No, this has happened to me several times. I've gotten a lot of my close friends to read TOG and they're like, okay, which book should I start with? And I'm like, okay, let me explain to you in great detail and it's super a lot of context so I can explain to you why you should do this. And they're just like, oh, okay. Because I feel very strongly about this.
You do.
I think about it sometimes. Just out of nowhere, my brain brings it to me.
That's funny. She vows to settle the debt. Then Rowan appears at the grave, hand held out to pick out a stone to offer. As we just talked about, I thought this was really sweet because it's clear Rowan has some growing feelings for Aelin, but he definitely respects Sam and understands his importance to her. And picking out a stone to offer must have also meant a lot to Aelin as well. Rowan confirms she planned to kill Arobynn, and she also states that she planned to go back after he'd gone to bed after their meeting. Rowan also asks about the Amulet of Warmth, which Aelin states is an endgame, but also a distraction. The chapter ends with Aelin's stoic words, I have no choice but to be ready. And that ends chapter 39, moving on to chapter 40. We check in at Morath, where Elide has hatched a wickedly clever plan to poison the breakfast bread rolls to incapacitate some of the laundresses for a few days. First off, I don't know. I guess it's kind of funny when I think about it. She's like, bread rolls, poison. Yes. But, okay, this actually finally answers the question for what Elide needed the poison for. I thought she was going to try and poison Vernon or something, but clearly I was wrong. That was not what she was doing.
I know. We were so confident about that. We even had our clever, Vernon, what kills vermin, poison. I was like, wow, we fucking nailed that. And then boom, to freaking make the
Wrong.
laundresses sick. That was really disappointing.
But second, the plan works. Everyone blamed the chicken instead of the bread rolls. And Elide had her chance to figure out where the bloody clothes came from through her few days helping out as a laundress. So while she's down there, finally the bloody vomit-covered clothes arrive, and it's nightfall by the time Elide finishes cleaning them. But then she is directed to a set of stairs leading to the subterranean levels, and the room she was looking for was behind the second door on the left. I would also like to say, I was misinformed about where the watery bowels thing came from. The whole time, I thought it came from TOG or something, but it's actually from ACOTAR, which is really embarrassing for me because I did read ACOTAR and I have no recollection of watery bowel references whatsoever. So clearly I've forgotten. I was telling Addison about this. I was in such a
state.
Such a zone. Yeah, I was quite literally an ACOTAR fiend. I was just reading these books so fast and like not properly comprehending a lot of things. I was just reading to get the story, so I wasn't really cluing in on a lot of stuff, but apparently it's from ACOTAR. But now we have that reference in TOG as well.
I did an ebook search for you. This is the first and only time bowels is used in this context, so yeah. I think it's mostly an ACOTAR thing.
Okay, yeah.
What an unpleasant description.
Elide makes it downstairs, and it says Elide's bowels had turned to water by the time she reached the guards. To be honest, I don't think my bowels would remain intact either after witnessing what Elide sees. So
fair. And also, can we stop saying the word bowels, please? I'm not enjoying it.
You don't like it? Does it make you uncomfortable?
A little bit, yes. I don't like
potty talk. Does it make your bowels watery? Oh.
God, stop saying that. Oh my God.
Anyways, Elide hears moans of pain, terror, and despair as she descends the stairwell until she reaches the door where she sees what look like claw marks pushing out from within. She sets the clothes down and knocks on the door and then fakes a fall to buy herself some time to look inside. Before the scene change, I also found it interesting that Elide notices it gets colder and icy by the time she gets to the door where the Valg are breeding with the witches. I feel like this is one of the first times that coldness has been associated with the Valg, if I remember correctly. So I'm just noting it just in case.
For whatever reason, I do associate cold with the Valg. But that could be because it's always in like the deepest, darkest chambers of the castle or mountain or wherever they are. Like the further subterranean you go, it's going to be colder than it would be anywhere else. I think maybe I also just associate them with darkness because there's no light or warmth. They're quite literally like night and darkness themselves where there's no...
True.
I don't know. So maybe that's why I tried to go back in the ebook and try to search for some Valg interactions. I think it's just kind of a given correlation between those two, like Valg, dark, evil, cold.
Yeah.
The antithesis of Mala Lightbringer.
Yeah, if it is related to them, then I think this is the first time that coldness specifically has kind of been brought up in a similar context. But it could also be what you said, where it's just because they're going deep underground. So later on, Elide vomits as she tells Manon, Astrid, and Sorrel what she had seen. With a fury in her voice for the first time, Elide states the thing that opened the door was a beautiful man, a man with golden hair and a collar around his neck. But he was not a man. There was nothing human in his eyes. When he saw me on the ground, he smiled at me, and this darkness leaked out of him. And this is where I had a huge revelation.
Ooh.
I think this Valg she saw might actually be Roland Havillard. Because remember how we kept freaking wondering what happened to him and where he went? And then this Valg is described as being beautiful with blonde hair, and Roland is described as having blonde hair and green eyes, and he looks similar to Dorian, except for the fact that he's a little shorter. And the descriptions of him made him sound attractive, so I'm willing to bet that this is finally where Roland has been the whole time.
Yep, maybe. 100%. 100%. There's no doubt in my mind that this is Roland. We know he and Kaltain were moved together to Morath, and this finally answers the question of where the hell he has been, but it doesn't answer the question of what he's been doing.
Elide continues on, and we learn that the witches were being implanted multiple times, which surprises Manon, Sorrel, and Astrid. According to her, they've delivered at least one baby each and are already about to give birth to another.
So every piece of information Elide reveals literally got more horrifying. There wasn't even internal screaming. It was external for me. I just heard those violins from Psycho that are like... And I'm like, yeah, it did not get better. Did not get better the longer it went on.
Totally agree. A, this is horrible and sounds horrific. And B, that is a quick turnaround time for producing these offspring. Which is also scary because they could make so many of these demon things in such a short time span if they wanted to. The offspring born are, quote, not babies, they are creatures. They are demons. Their skin is like black diamond and they have these snouts with teeth, fangs, and not like yours. They have teeth of black stone and there's nothing of you in them. And I was like, these sound like awful fucking things. They came out looking like the daddies, and it's a hell nah for me.
It's a hell nah.
The yellow legs are also not doing well and have been chained to the tables forced to endure what I am willing to bet is probably a pretty mutilating birth process.
Yeah, especially because it's described like they're quite literally chained to altars and like begging to be let go. And honestly, I'm wondering if physically they can only do this so many times before it actually just ends up killing them.
Right. Because typically, if they had magic, they would be able to kind of heal themselves a little bit at least, right?
I guess.
But
I don't know.
Without magic, I don't know. Like, yeah. Everyone is, of course, horrified. Astrid, in particular, is reignited with fury at Manon for letting them do this.
I will say, I think even Manon was surprised because it's described. Yeah. Then there were tears in Astrid's eyes. And we know that the witches don't cry. Especially not Blackbeaks, and especially not the 13. So this must be really triggering for Astrid for some specific reason.
Yes. I think there is something about Astrid's past that makes her particularly attuned to just like what's going on with the witchlings and stuff, or just like witch culture. So Manon stands her ground, stating she was doing what she was ordered to do, and a full-on brawl is about to ensue. Astrid, with tears in her eyes, says, "You're not going to free them. You're not going to fight for them. For us, because what would grandmother say? Why hasn't she answered your letters, Manon? How many have you sent now?" We already had a feeling Granny was hiding shit, and it's confirmed she and the other High Witches have been working on a project that they didn't tell Manon about. But I really do think that Granny was aware of how this would go as well. But she doesn't care and has her own reasons for going along with this that obviously she hasn't disclosed to Manon or any of us as readers yet, but Granny. I also continue to appreciate Astrid in her willingness to question and oppose what's being done.
Yeah, me too. To be honest, I kind of like Astrid more than Manon at this point.
I know.
Manon is sort of falling out of favor with me. She's just not doing anything. She doesn't even seem that upset.
She's letting everybody else do the questioning and figure out what's going on. But then she still wants to like maintain control and order, which I get because it's not like you can let all of this get to chaos because chaos is not better. But I do want her to make a more concerted effort to figure out what's going on and do something about it. So
yes, just do something. Do anything.
Despite this, Manon gives Astrid a punishment to be doled out at breakfast in the morning and threatens execution if she tried to free the Yellowlegs or do anything stupid. I also thought it was interesting that Manon takes close note of the feelings she saw in Astrid, who had something like hurt flash across her face when Sorrel had told her to leave while you can still walk. Astrid and Ghislaine both seem to have more feelings and behave much more like human beings as far as like emotional expression goes than any of the other witches do. I don't really know what that means yet, but it does continue adding to everything that we've been discussing about the witches being made and the way that they are, and just our general sense that something about Manon is different, something about Astrid and Ghislaine clearly is different. So just questions about what's going on. And like I said earlier, I do continue to believe that there is more to Astrid and these specific triggers that she has with protecting witchhood and the witchlings. So,
yeah, I completely agree. I hope at some point we get her backstory, and it seems likely that we will because she's becoming a central enough character to warrant that. If we're getting Lysander's backstory, we're going to get Astrid's backstory.
We change to Elide's perspective, who is also shocked by Astryn's impassioned response, noting it had shocked her to see the witch lose control so completely. She had never seen any of them react with anything but cool amusement, indifference, or raging bloodlust.
Yeah, Astryn's emotional response again brings up for me that Crocken witch's words, "You were made to be this way." And I'm like, Elide
finishes bandaging Manon's arm and apparently feels more bold herself as she asks, "Is your broken kingdom worth it?"
Manon then responds with, "I do not expect a human to understand what it is like to be an immortal with no homeland, to be cursed with eternal exile." Now, this is where I got a little emotional about the witch's story, so just bear with me. This is an idea that I hadn't really considered or explored. The witches are powerful immortal beings. So why the fuck do they care whether they can go back to any specific place, right? They have immortality, they're beautiful, they're lethal, they have it all, right? I'm going to go a little deep here, and I'm going to do a classic Addison thing where I start talking about something completely off topic, but then I'll bring it back full circle, okay? So, fun fact about me is I had this deep fascination and fear of space and space exploration. A lot of things about space really freak me out, and if I think about it too hard, it can actually be kind of paralyzing. But completely counterintuitively, several of my most favorite movies are set in space. And I'm not talking oh, they were so enjoyable to watch movies. I mean, they have foundationally changed me. And I think that they're actual art kind of favorite movies. And I said something to my husband many years ago that he still talks about. And we had just seen Ad Astra with Brad Pitt in it. I was very emotional. And he was just like, "Honey, why do you keep subjecting yourself to these movies? They make you upset, And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just be emotionally damaged. I don't know why I am this way. But I told him, you know what I like about all movies about space? And he said, what? And I told him it's because they're all about going home. And I think that really struck a chord with him because he still brings it up. And so this conversation between Elide and Manon, though brief, really resonated with me in that way. So many books, shows, movies, and really other mediums of art are about going home and having a sense of place or being displaced. And I think this concept, the idea of home, is the one thing that binds and connects us all. It's the one thing people quite literally fight and die for. Manon's comment shows me that you can have immortality, ethereal beauty, and even a community, but it is all meaningless without a home to anchor you. For example, look at Aelin. What is her entire goal in life? To make it home and to protect that home from harm. And so I think I never really processed and internalized why the witches care so much about the waste, right? And what it means to not be able to go home. But that drive to be anchored to something and somewhere is so strong that even an immortal being can't overcome that. I don't know why this very brief conversation prompted this very deep thought for me, but I'm like, okay, I think I kind of get it now. Hence my new investment in the witches and their goals and storyline.
Oh, I really like that. I think it ties all of them together as living creatures as well, that they all have this very living, breathing being response of having the same ultimate goal for their species or whatever their community is, right? And so
for their people.
Yeah. I also really like that Elide perceives and understands that because she tells Manon, "It is hope for your homeland that guides you and that makes you obey." So I felt like that was pretty, intuitive of her to assess that. And Manon asks why Elide had decided to flee instead of fighting for her kingdom, but Elide continues with more info about Aelin and her mother's sacrifice to save her. Elide points out that she never believed Aelin had died and that she had told herself she's still out there and one day she would come to save Terrasen. And you are my enemy because if she returns, she will fight you. I was curious about whether she meant enemy just because they're witches or because the witches have now sided with the king. I'm assuming because the latter, because we know Brandon himself had decided to give the witches the wastes as a kindness. So I don't necessarily think it would be purely just fae versus witches or anything like that. So
no, I think it's just because of their alignment with the king.
Elide continues to state that she thought one day Aelin would come to save her and rescue her from the tower Vernon had locked her in. And she says, even though she never came, I can't let go of that. Hope is such a powerful thing, but I do think it's cool how at their core, everyone just wants to be free, basically, right? Everyone wants a home, as you pointed out, and they all want to be free of control from something else, right? Elide, like many others in the story so far, has experienced many awful things, but she continues on because she believes that one day everything she'd endured and that her parents had sacrificed will have been worth it. She basically needs Aelin to be alive and to free Terrasen because that is her path to freedom and returning home, as well, as you had said.
I think this conversation just circles back to the idea that both Manon and Elide have made the choices they have in hopes of getting back to the one thing in their lives that's worth fighting for, and that's home.
Yeah.
And I think this is especially true for Elide, who recognizes her own mother sacrificed her life for Aelin, who was their only chance at saving, you guessed it, her home.
Manon asks Elide if she would fight with Aelin if she was alive, and Elide says she would fight to get her, but there are lines I would not cross because I don't think I could face her if I couldn't face myself for what I'd done. I was just kind of wondering what she meant by that. What has Elide actually done? Because as far as we know, she's been locked in a tower against her will and has been a prisoner for the last 10 years. So I'm like, what do you mean?
I don't think she's done anything as of yet. I think what she means is there are certain moral boundaries she won't violate, like killing someone or whatever else that may be. Because for her, engaging in a heinous violent act to get to Aelin to do the quote-unquote right thing doesn't justify the behavior. The ends don't justify the means. And so if she does immoral things to get to Aelin, she feels like she won't be worthy of Aelin and Terrasen and all that because she will have tainted her soul. She won't be worth saving.
That makes sense. Before the chapter ends, I also find it interesting that when Manon asks Elide if she thinks monsters are born or made, Elide redirects it to her and says, I'm not the one who needs to answer that question. Again, very perceptive of her, and it's true. Manon has been undergoing this rethinking and reframing of the truth behind what the witches are doing and who they are and, what it means to be an Iron Teeth witch. Ultimately, her answer to that question is going to be what defines the new path for the witches in the future, I think.
Yeah, after this chapter, I'm just going to go ahead and say it here. Don't sleep on Elide Lorcan, okay? Don't sleep on Lady Keltane. Don't sleep on Elide. They're going to come up.
True.
Or get killed.
Yeah. And that now ends chapter 40. Moving on to our final chapter, chapter 41. The day of the meeting with Arobynn, Aelin contemplates the implications of Arobynn's nasty skin oil requests and thinks his scent because he knew that a female had come to stay with her and all signs pointed to their being close enough for scent to matter to Rowan. Once again, I was like, that's gross, but I just hope that this meeting goes well. I am very stressed thinking about it.
Yeah, it's so gross, especially the way it's described when she thinks for her breasts, her thighs, her neck to smell like almond, his chosen scent. And those are very intimate parts of the body. And so just there's something gross about Arobynn giving that to her and him thinking about her putting that on. I can't even finish the thought. It's just gross to me. You know what? Obligatory fuck Arobynn Hamel. Okay.
That's right. Fuck Arobynn Hamel. While Aelin gets ready, Rowan and Aedion stand watch from the roof. And Rowan briefly wonders if perhaps Aelin had sent the word hounds after Lorcan to help keep him away so that he couldn't detect Aedion's lineage. Aedion correctly guesses that Aelin planned to kill Arobynn later, after which she proudly adds, "That's my girl." And then Rowan probes him with two questions. One, what if she spares him? And two, what if she told them to take care of it? Aedion's responses pass the test, with him agreeing that in the end it was Aelin's decision and that he'd hope Rowan would join him in taking Arobynn down if required. The final question comes down to who would get to kill Arobynn if asked, and Aedion states, "You took the blood oath, I get Arobynn's killing blow." I did wonder if Rowan has any extra plans to trap Arobynn or something later. I would hope someone would, because they definitely should be making plans A, B, C, and D for someone like Arobynn. But aside from that, once again, I love the dedication that they both have to Aelin.
More like plans A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. You're going to want to go pretty far into the alphabet.
All the way through the alphabet.
Yeah, then you may want to go to A, A, B, B, But yeah, I'm enjoying Rowan and Aedion's peace or truce or whatever you want to call it. It seems like their path for the most part, the alpha female bullshit. Now they're just on the same team, which I like.
Just before they are ready to depart, the Val commander are locked away in the trunk of a carriage outside. Aelin emerges and takes Rowan's breath away with that black golden dragon dress.
Ooh, so I'm super proud of myself because I was 100% right. That dress would come back up again, and it did in fact, but I was also 100% wrong because it came up extremely quickly, and it wasn't just for Rowan or a coronation or some other important event. So I was kind of like, oh, well, that came up a lot faster than I thought it was going to.
Yeah, I didn't think the turnaround on that was going to be so fast, but
same.
I'm glad it did, though. The dress is a tight black velvet one, but I did find it interesting that she uses golden bat-wing-shaped combs that rose above either side of her head like a primal headdress. So I point all of this out because, A, we had talked about that dress being important somehow later, and this seems to be why. And I also did wonder if Aelin intentionally chose to wear it to assure Rowan that despite the skin oil that she had to wear for Arobynn, this was like her way of reassuring him since they talked about the dress together.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so.
And then B, bat wings, bat boys. It's probably not related in any way, but I still thought it'd be fun to point out. So, and then C, primal headdress was just interesting wording because primal means essential or like fundamental, and it's related to the Latin word primus, which means first. As we've seen, Aelin is the heroine and seems to be the key to whatever's going on. And along a similar line, she is going to be the first to do something, and perhaps the first to banish the Valg from Aurelia permanently. Maybe, hopefully.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I'm liking this train of thought.
Yeah, I don't know. I also like that Adian wore a green tunic, and that's the color of Terrasen. It's just symbolic because everything that they're doing obviously is for the future of Terrasen. So Rowan cannot help himself and looks over her with what Aelin swears is hunger, ravenous hunger, flickering in his eyes. But she announces that it's time to go for demons and dining.
And that's what I call having dinner with my in-laws.
Yay.
No, totally kidding. Just kidding. My mother-in-law is lovely, and my father-in-law actually lives in another state, so we don't see him very often. So just in case they ever listen to this and it gets back to them, totally joking.
Maybe dining with your children.
Hey!
Just kidding.
I think that's
that was a generic comment.
I know.
Children.
I was going to say think dining with children in general. The thing is, at least my kids, like, they're good at dinner. It's just, they always need something. Mommy, can you get me white paper towel? Mommy, can you get me something to drink? Mommy, can I have more of this? You know, like, they still need help.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm not being serious, just to be clear, guys.
She is. Lorraine hates children,
No,
guys.
I don't.
No, she doesn't. We used to be teachers, okay? You can't be a teacher and hate children.
So Aelin looks like the true fire-breathing Bridge Queen, but she also couldn't help but notice how attractive Rowan looked as well, with a silver accented black jacket that matched his hair and contrasted with his tattoos. And I was just thinking, like, can you imagine if these two walked into a ball together somewhere? It would be game over. Hands down, best dressed. And I don't think I'd be able to stop staring at both of them.
Oh, my dream is to see them at the Met Gala. I think they would break the internet.
Ooh,
they could totally rock some kind of dynamic duo thing.
You're right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But to close out this chapter, they exchange a joke and a wink before heading out to the carriage. And that now concludes our analysis. Stay tuned for the actual Arobynn meeting next week.
Which will hopefully be the last meeting with Arobynn.
All right. So now we just have our favorite moments to share.
So one of my favorite moments, the first thing is in the chapter with Lorcan. Lorcan calls Aelin a bitch and she says, you know, I'm really rather tired of being called that. You'd think 5 centuries would give you enough time to come up with something more creative. And I'm like, dude, yes, you couldn't think of anything else.
That's true. And then within that conversation as well, I thought it was funny when she says, immortality seems like a long, long time to go without your favorite body part.
Also in that conversation, or I guess this one's later when she's talking to Rowan and she says, at least I said it would be a big mistake. She said with a fiendish grin, I was tempted to say little. And I thought that was so funny.
She should have said little.
She should have went for it, yeah.
The next one's a little more serious. It's when they go to the grave. Aelin thinks, I loved you, and I think a part of me might always love you. Maybe you were my mate, and I never knew it. Maybe I'll spend the rest of my life wondering about that. Maybe I'll see you again in the afterworld, and then I'll know for sure. But until then, I'll miss you, and I'll wish you were here.
Oh, why did that make me want to tear up even just now hearing you read it? Very similarly for me, I tried to narrow it down, but I love so many moments from this scene at Sam's grave that I'm just going to say that the whole scene is one of my favorites. It was just really moving and emotional. It made me tear up, and especially Rowan's involvement in that and just everything, picturing her leaving the stones and sitting with her back against the gravesite and then just like telling him everything, and just the whole scene was really touching.
And then to round out our favorite moments, my last one was from Elide. And it's when she says, I endured Vernon because of her, because of the hope that she got away and my mother's sacrifice wasn't in vain. I thought that one day Aelin would come to save me, even though she never came. I can't let go of that, and I think that is why you obey, because you have been hoping every day of your miserable, hideous life that you'll get to go home. Home.
All I can hear is that song, Darling, won't you take me home? That's all I can hear.
That's a great song.
I know.
And yeah, that now concludes our episode today. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Book Dumping Sync podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and check out our social media pages to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today. So stay nerdy.
And remember, you can't be punished for crimes you commit in your head.
We'll catch you all next week for Queen of Shadows, episode 7. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for some bloopers.
Oh no, there's a train. Can you hear that?
Oh.
I
think it's funny you can hear my children, but I can't hear a train. Okay, let me yawn so I can get my yawn out of the way. Okay. I'm all yawned up. Lysandra is a shapeshifter. I think I spoiled that. Shapeshifter. Okay, I messed that up. Roll it back. Okay.
Shifter.
A shapeshifter. A shifter shape. Okay. Chapter 41. Aelin stated at the stated. She stared. I wonder how Brello and
Ren.
Rest.
Not Ren.
Yeah,
Rest. That's what it was, yes.
She never mentioned him or seemed to miss him. She or seemed to miss him.
Rowan appears at the stone, a hand held out to pick out a stone to offer. Hold on.